All right, guys, we are here with episode number 52 of the conversation with me and Josiah Neely. And I'm not going to introduce who we are. I think you know who we are. Uh, so for the first thing that we want to talk about is, I guess, there's some stuff in the news about crime in DC and Trump administration sending in the National Guard, and also taking over some of the duties or interjecting themselves in the chain of command, so to speak, of the authorities in Washington D.C., which for the non-Americans out there, it's the nation's capital. It's not part of any state, and the federal government has it does have some jurisdiction in D.C. because it is the federal district, and this is prompted. By the fact that there is crime in DC, even though crime is decreasing, it's still pretty bad compared to peer cities on the East Coast. Also, DC has some unique crimes, I would say, to itself, particularly carjackings. Like carjackings by teenagers have been a big thing in DC, and they are not a big thing in other cities. And another thing that I would also say is, you know, it's always been actually since me and Josiah were kids, Josiah and I, whatever, a high crime city. But lately, it has gone through some gentrification and fits and starts, and it got a kind of better reputation, I would say. But now, there's some high profile events, and what we're seeing is kind of a disjunction between aggregate statistics, which are improving, and just some salient events. And what I would just say here is DC is a very, very segregated city racially, traditionally, socioeconomically. And the crime does impact and spill over to everybody, but it really, really hits the underprivileged, as they say, marginalized, whatever word you want to use. Like it's really bad for them. The journalists and commentators who are saying, well, actually, it's not that bad. I don't know anyone who's been carjacked and all this stuff. It's like, whatever. I mean, yeah, you don't. Like one of the journalists that I saw was like, "Well, I live in Arlington, and I'm like, yes. Why do you live in Arlington exactly? Why do you live across the river? There are some issues related to like the legal grounds or the efficacy, but I personally think there is an issue with public disorder in a lot of American cities, even though crime isn't as bad as it was in the 70s or 80s. Our population is considerably older, actually, so you got to think about it that way, where kind of got to get out of jail free card in terms of we have like an American population that's almost 40 years old, whereas it was like 27 was the median age in 1970, so a lot more young men. So of course, crime was gonna be violent crime was going to be in a higher baseline, anyway, that's what I just to start out with. What do you think, Josiah?
Um, well, okay. Couple things. I mean, first, the general trend in I mean, crime does seem to be pretty cyclical in the United States. And in particular, you had a period where crime went up a lot in the 60s and 70s, and then it went down considerably in the 90s and 2000s in most places. I mean, there's some cities like Baltimore, for example, where I don't think crime went down that much. Certainly not like murder or whatever. Some other places. Um, and then starting about 10 years ago, it started to click up a little bit again. And then in particular, summer of 2020, you saw really big spikes in particularly in homicide and some other categories of crime. There's actually there were some categories of crime, like some types of property crime, I think, that didn't go up that much. Although later you had issues, but clearly that was related to the whole George Floyd uh, thing, and that was high for a little while. Crime has now been going down for a couple of years. Um, so the spike has kind of receded in most places, including in DC. I think this is fair to say. It is DC was always kind of a high crime place, a little bit, or certain parts of DC. Uh, I disagree with you a little bit in terms of it doesn't affect journalists or other elite people. In that it, I'm sure it doesn't affect them as much, but uh, DC is it's a weird city in that like you could like a bad area and a really nice area could be a block and a half from each other, you know? And so very often people who are part of these elites get caught up in crime problems. I know, Matt Iglesias, for example, he got attacked. It was many years ago. There was there's another journalist who I think was also at Cap with him, Brian Bueller, got shot.
Yeah, Brian Butler. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Um, Justice, it wasn't widely reported, but a few months ago, uh, the Supreme Court justices, they have, I don't know if it's Secret Service, but it's equivalent of Secret Service, at least, kind of, watching them, because of threats. And so some Secret Service agents were outside of her house and someone tried to carjack them and got shot, for his efforts. But those are all, uh, the most recent, probably high profile case is one of the Doge kids. I forget his real name, but his online name was Big Balls, right? He apparently intervened, like some people were attacking a woman and intervened and got beat up or whatever. So I'm sure people are more insulated. Being rich is always, being rich or being elite. I mean, journalists are not necessarily very rich, but being elite, you're probably insulated to some extent. But DC's elite is probably less insulated than in a lot of other places, I mean, if you're, I mean, there are examples, but if you're in like San Francisco or Houston or there's just there's more of a like division uh between the rich areas and high crime areas or whatever. So, this is a big problem. I guess the Trump administration has said they want to kind of federalize or nationalize policing, send in the guard. I don't know. I don't know exactly what their plan is. Um, on the one hand, this is not. I don't know that it's hugely significant in that DC has had home rule only for the last 50 years, right? Most of the time, it was kind of directly governed by Congress. It's still federal jurisdiction, so it's a weird thing where most cities where we are in Austin, most of the crime, if you rob somebody or if you shoot somebody or if you rape somebody, absent special circumstances, that's just a state crime, and the feds are not going to get involved. In DC, it's kind of like everything is federal, and the U.S. attorney uh, is federal or whatever. So there's already, I guess, a greater. So I guess the two things are: one is there's already a greater degree of federal control, and otherwise crime is already coming down. So I don't know what the huge difference is going to be necessarily.
yeah. So one thing that I have been uh thinking about is that this is an opportunity for Trump, imposing order on the city, basically doing a Bloomberg. So I don't know if in terms of our audience, like how often they went to New York City between, say, I don't know, like 2005 and 2015. I think De Blasio took over in 2014, right? Uh,
I think that's right.
yeah. So, but during that like 2014, during about like a 10-year interval though, between 2005, I mean, really, it was earlier. It extended to the Giuliani period, but Bloomberg, who's basically has always been a moderate Democrat, like the whole Republican Bloomberg thing was kind of fake, or it wasn't fake, but he had to run as a Republican to win. Uh, he ran the city almost like a playground for the upper middle class,
Hmm.
which is okay, like you could say that that's bad, maybe, but the reality is, like, this is one of the most economically productive cities in the country. It's the capital of culture and the arts. Uh, if the upper middle class are happy with the way the city is being run, that's a pretty good sign, in my opinion. You know, in terms of like you get like a higher tax base, you get more services. Also, I mean, when you have people of diverse socioeconomic status, and in particular, you have like fewer lower class people, probably is going to be safer. Probably is going to be cleaner, et cetera, et cetera. De Blasio was elected because I mean, basically, people just got tired of boring, I guess, and they wanted some excitement. And it didn't really go to hell in a handbasket immediately, but you know, in the years even before the pandemic, things started like going in a negative trajectory. And I think part of it was part of it was the decarceral movement or whatever you want to call it. Basically, a bunch of liberal and to some extent libertarian. I think people forget the Koch Foundation funded a lot of anti-incarceration stuff. Uh, you know, um, think tank people and also policy people and lawyers, and we know that the whole George Soros attorneys. Basically they brought soft on crime back, which is a term from our childhood. Soft on crime judges, soft on
Yeah.
and this was a huge thing in the 70s and 80s, and it really, really took the Democratic Party a generation to kind of accept that, that just wasn't a winning formula. Bill Clinton, passed the crime bill. Actually, Joe Biden was involved in that. And crime is a major problem for everyone. But it's actually like huge problem for the biggest problem is for the poor. So actually, like this idiot, Anand Girdadas, was talking about how he's more worried when he goes to DC about like that they're going to take his voting rights away, that not that someone's going to steal his wallet. The
Okay.
thing though is like if you're a genuinely poor person or a working class person, that is a huge pain in the ass. I mean, that's a disaster because you have to get stuff canceled, get stuff replaced. You probably have cash in there that you're losing, and you can't like afford to lose like a little bit of cash. Fernand Gerdidas, who is a pretty well off journalist, he's kind of a superstar journalist, that is an inconvenience. His life, for example, he doesn't work an hourly job. Like he could take, for example, like people like me and you, we could just do our errands whenever we want to because
Right.
we control our own allocation of time. Whereas if you're a working class person, you work an hourly job and your boss isn't going to be happy if you're like, hey, I got to go down and, get new ID and do this and do that. So all of these little minor inconveniences for someone like Anand Gurdadas would be a total disaster for a working class person or a poor person. And I just think it's really, say tone deaf, but really like you don't understand how people on the literal margin, how these things can affect their lives and how it's like a major quality of life problem. And this is why, a lot of poor and working class people in urban areas just don't vote because they're just like, no one cares. Nothing's ever going to change. It's just crap, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, I don't totally understand the soft on crime verging into like pro crime mindset of some people on the left. Obviously the victims of crime are not overwhelmingly rich people. The people who are getting shot, killed, the issues with neighborhoods. Um, it's just, it's a little baffling. I don't want to psychoanalyze people necessarily, but I think we've pretty much. I think it's pretty well established that crime is kind of a choice. Like you can drive crime to very low levels, um, and if you want to, and uh, I I would like that to happen. I think a lot of people would like that to happen. It's just a matter of whether elites are willing to do that. And historically, you've kind of had a cyclical thing where crime will get bad enough for a while, people will get pissed off enough that they'll do something about it. But then, if you have a period where crime is relatively low, people kind of forget, and uh, some of the things that you have to do in order to maintain low crime seem kind of mean, right? And so you want to stop that. Um, you know, I don't know. It's we are, I would say, even at the worst of the 2020, 2021 period, fortunately, we were still a lot better off than we were in the 1970s and early 80s, say. So that's something, right? It seems like the spike was lower than the last time, and it didn't last as long as the last time. So, people seem to kind of like the learning curve was quicker, right? Which is a positive. Hopefully, uh, like I still think that crime is unacceptably high in most major cities. Um, no, there are some I suppose that are fine. Austin, I think actually the crime here is decently low. Um, but yeah, so I don't, the ideology of whatever, it doesn't make political sense. I don't think it makes logical sense, but human beings are like that sometimes.
Well, it's just interesting what people just get used to as like normal, and then like they go somewhere else and it's not seen as normal, and they're like, oh, you could live like in a totally. So I grew up. I just like for context for the listener, I lived in upstate New York when I was a kid, and my dad was a grad student at SUNY Albany, and within a couple of years, we moved to the edge of the city to get away from like the crime in the downtown area. It wasn't that bad, I mean, but it wasn't great. And then I moved to Eastern Oregon, and that was in a small town in Eastern Oregon, right? There was no crime there. And so, this is still in the early 1990s. There is still a lot of crime in other parts of the country, and people just accept it. Like, for example, a friend of ours here in Austin, he grew up in the suburbs of Detroit. You just didn't go to the city. The city was just like a no-go zone, We just accepted that. Uh, do we need to accept that? Is this like a law of nature? I don't think so. Crime just wasn't as bad before 1965. And, probably there's some like structural demographic issues, but also there's probably also just the policy responses. I would say Austin's pretty good in my personal experience. You know, and like I think part of the thing that Trump pointed out is this is the capital of the United States. Like
Right.
it shouldn't be one of the worst, one of the worst, out one of the worst cities.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's right. And, I wonder about, as I mentioned previously, I do wonder about the efficacy of this, in particular. I don't know that the problem is um a lack of federal police or whatever, or national police. I don't know. I personally, I am open to revoking home rule. Um to be honest, I personally would kind of favor I think it's called retrocision. Just give the land back to Maryland, with the exception of, maybe like the Capitol complex or something like, uh, like that. So
Like basically like having almost Vatican City where you might have like
correct. Yes.
a little tiny enclave
Yeah.
that's officially not in Maryland, but most of the city, like Northwest DC is basically a suburb of Maryland, or not suburb, but it's a suburb in Maryland. Like it's contiguous with it's contiguous with like Rockville and those areas. I think Montgomery County. You know,
Right.
the northeast area is contiguous with Prince George County. So yeah, it naturally makes sense. It's kind of artificial.
Right. And this can be done. The district used to be bigger. There were some parts that were originally granted from Virginia, and for whatever reason, they were given back to Virginia. So I think Arlington maybe used to be in the district. I don't know if that's the part exactly, but so it could be done. But anyway, um, you know, I guess so I don't know that it's going to make a huge difference. I think it would if we were able to if Trump is able to get crime down noticeably under by doing whatever, I think that would be a giant feather in his cap. I would also suggest um, maybe he could, take over the metro system and try and get that working better, get the escalators actually working, other things like that in the DC metro system. Um, that would
Plus,
also
so
probably.
I know that I never followed up on this, but years ago I heard that they actually were the DC Metro were targeted by like civil rights to the EEOC because
Mm,
they had almost no non-black employees in a city that was about 50% non-black. You
yeah.
know,
Hmm.
so it was obviously everything was through patronage and through just connections and nepotism, and so there are some governance issues in the city. Obviously, it's a problem in cities in general with unions and LA just had like there's a piece about like LA's like the money given out through lawsuits has increased by like a factor of 10 over the last like couple of years, I guess.
Hmm.
So obviously this is just transferred to friends of people in city
Right.
government because it's not their money, it's other people's money, you know?
Yeah.
I guess, the thing I would say is we don't even have like super cities in this country. We don't even have like Tokyo type cities, you know? So
Hmm.
and obviously we're not Japanese, so Americans are not Japanese. It's gonna be a little bit more chaotic, more dirty. There's gonna be more crime. That's a fact. I just think that we could do a lot better.
Yeah.
Uh, and uh, and I think there are some things. There are some things like I don't know. Well, I mean, like I think most of the listeners and viewers know. That's when it comes to something like education. There's just like certain things you just can't do. Okay, you're
Right.
not going to get rid of inequality in education. We don't have any understanding of how to do these sort of things. I think with crime, we do understand. We just choose not to. We choose not to, and that is extremely frustrating.
Yeah. And I will say, DC, like there's some cities, uh, like St. Louis, for example, or Detroit, where ooh, even if they were to, I mean, it would definitely be good if they were to solve their crime or other problems, but they have a lot more structural issues of, how they're going to compete in the global marketplace or whatever. And DC has an inherent advantage, as Trump says, it's like the capital. I mean, it's the U.S. capital, so there's all sorts of money that's flowing in. There's other stuff. So it's not like it's a city that has to worry economically if it can get other stuff in order, really, right? I mean, to some extent, it has to do like there's going to be a lot of money flowing into the city no matter what. So if you could get crime under control, um, and public transport and a couple other things like that, then I think you could see greater returns to that than you could for most other cities, right? I mean, the only peer cities in that sense would be maybe like New York or San Francisco. I would say.
Yeah, yeah. All right, we should probably get on to the other topic. So another topic, we want to talk about films, I guess, which
Yes.
that's more of a I don't know if we've ever mentioned this, but you weren't you like a film studies major or something in college at some point?
I started out, yeah, as a radio, television, and film major. I was interested in that, but I switched because because I quickly found out at I went to the University of Texas, and they have a very well regarded film program, but it's much more theory based. If you talk to people, if you want to go to film school, the big places you want to go are NYU, UCLA. You want to be in Los Angeles or uh, New York, and I think the film program at UT might have been ranked third or fourth, but it was so theory heavy that you didn't actually get to do anything with like cameras and editing or whatever until your third year. The first 2 years were all just like film theory, type courses. That was kind of boring. So I switched. So I was only a full major for a semester or two, something like that. But I did really like movies. I still like movies for a while. I really wasn't seeing a lot of movies because of COVID and kids, and a lot of them were kind of not that good, lousy, you know. But this summer I have managed to see a number of movies, and I want to talk about some of them, even though you've not seen any of these. Um, but let me just start with uh, a meta movie experience that I had. So this weekend, my the kids wanted to go see a movie, and we had already seen Bad Guys 2, which is kind of like the big kids, summer movie or whatever. So I was looking around to see, okay, well, what else is there that we could go see? And I found that it was the opening weekend for this movie called Sketch, right? Uh, which is it's put out by Angel Studios, which is a kind of a Christian production company. They did The Chosen, which is a TV series about life of Jesus, which is pretty good. They've done some other, um,
Oh, yeah, so it was founded in Provo, Utah, so a very specific type of Christian, I think.
yeah. So originally, just the backstory, uh, it was founded by LDS people, and originally it was called Vid Angel, and back in the '90s, I think. And their original business model is they would take mainstream movies and TV shows and edit them to remove like objectionable content, profanity, nudity, other stuff like that, right? So this would be a way if you want to see Titanic with the family, but you don't want your kids to see like the nudie shots of Kate Winslet. You you know,
This is literally like what bowdlerization was, right?
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think yeah, that might have been. I mean, uh, people get like really huffy and indignant about this, but anytime one of these movies was shown on network TV, they did this.
Yes, I
Uh,
remember. Yeah, we
when you
remember.
when you play a song on the radio, they do this. So it's not like
But also the swearing and stuff like that. I remember when I
yeah,
was a kid or as a teen, the first time I saw something on video that I had seen already, I was like, "Wait a second."
right, yes, right, yeah, and yeah. So this is like sometimes comically so. I remember there was a movie starring Samuel L. Jackson called Snakes on a Plane, right? And uh which seemed like it should have been awesome, but as it turned out, it was actually kind of lame. But there was a famous line in the movie, which is Samuel saying, I'm tired of these MF snakes on this MF plane. And when they showed the movie on television, I remember there was uh I remember people were like, "Well, how are they gonna do that line?" Because that's like the iconic line from the film. And so they had him saying, "I'm tired of these monkey fighting snakes on this Monday to Friday plane," right? So anyway, so that's what they that was their origins, Vid Angel, and then about 10 years, 5, 10 years ago, they pivoted to doing like actual content. So, it's I don't know how explicitly Christian all of the stuff is. Some of it, a lot of it has religious themes or whatever, but not all of it. And it's got probably more star power and better production values than, I mean, the stereotype of like Christian movies or whatever is that they're just not that good. They're kind of like B movies, perhaps even less. Anyway, so the new movie is called Sketch. It's got Tony Hale, who was on Arrested Development and Veep, and it's basically there's a 10-year-old kid, a girl. She likes to draw monsters and other things in her sketchbook, and then the sketchbook uh falls into a magic pond, so all the like monsters come to life. All right, so it's a little and but the monsters look like cartoony. They look like I don't know, like what you would expect for little kid monsters.
Yes. Yes.
So okay, so we go. So I'm like, fine, uh, the kids liked the trailer. There wasn't really any other options, and I figured it's like Angel Studios, so it's rated PG. It's like a kids movie or whatever. But we go and we're watching the movie, and then like 20 minutes into the movie, they're like dropping S bombs, right? And there was like some other weird stuff about the movie. It was a little on the edge side or whatever. But my older son, as you know, he's very strict about language. So he doesn't like bad language. He gets into arguments with people if they
He's like the Captain America of your family.
correct, yes. So he's like, and there were, so he's like, can we leave? And so we left. Um, and I tweeted about this, or I posted about it on X, and I think the head of Angel Studios responded and was like, "Oh, well, you need to read this blog post that we put out about the movie and how even though it's PG, it's really more like a in between PG and PG-13, and it's appropriate only. We say it's like a really only appropriate for kids 8 and above or whatever." So okay, this this annoyed me. Uh, for one thing, like in general, I mean, it's a sad fact that I do often. My wife and I will check out kids themed content, online. We'll look into it beforehand, just because you get burned in the past. Like even though something's for kids, they sneak in a lot of what we would consider inappropriate stuff or whatever. Um, but I don't know. I assumed that a Christian movie, you wouldn't have to do that, right? You wouldn't have to worry about that. Um, and it felt a little like the post felt a little condescending, but even beyond that, I mean, why the H double hockey sticks is that stuff in the movie anyway? Like, I don't, I don't understand why, if you're making a movie that's geared towards kids, uh, you don't just keep it clean. I'm not. Um, I don't think I'm overly puritanical about this. I'm not like I don't think uh if they should not have had cursing in Goodfellas, or like a David Mamet movie, right? Like I understand, but if you're doing something that's geared towards kids, like this really it's not like it's necessary to the plot uh to be saying like potty words, you know? And so it seems like in general, this happens a lot, you know. Superman, which is another movie that I saw this summer, which I thought was good. It was a feel good lighter Superman movie. I think it would have been perfectly fine to take the kids to accept that they put in some bad words. And there, maybe you could say, maybe they did it on purpose to get a like PG-13 rating because they felt their target audience, they would be limited if it was only PG. I don't know. But if you're a Christian movie studio, you really have no excuse. I don't really get it. So I do like I think it's a problem in general, how much profanity is out there. Especially for stuff that is geared towards kids or, is geared towards like all audiences. But in particular, if you're gonna like put yourself out there as the Black Rifle Coffee of Christian movies or whatever, then why are you doing that? Why would you? I mentioned that they started out as Vid Angel, which would remove swearing from the movies. Like I would think that their own movies, maybe they could bring that service for their own movies, right? So this is just something that really annoys me, both in general about trying to find content for the family, and then in particular about this movie and experience.
But it has to be money though, right?
I get like how does I don't maybe, but realistically, how does uh adding that language to a film make them money, right? I mean, you would think most people probably don't care, okay? Like most people probably don't care, but a few people do care. I
That's
don't think
yeah,
anyone's going to go see the movie specifically because they say that word, you know?
yeah,
Um, so and it would be one thing if they were deliberately trying to get a higher rating, but it's still PG. So if that was their plan, it didn't work, you know? Maybe they were trying to avoid a G rating. I don't know. Um, but I mean, G and PG movies actually do very well. Uh,
yeah, yeah,
because like for obvious reasons, there's a lot like kids like to go to the movies. Parents like to take kids to the movies, and they're not going to take them to see something that's rated R or even PG-13, depending on the age of the kids or whatever.
yeah,
So I do not think that it is ultimately a money thing. I think it's I mean, people want like they feel like they want to be edgy or more they want like more mainstream acceptance or something. They want to break out of their reputation as being like some sort of goody goody Christian thing. But that's your thing. If you're like this is the reason you exist.
yeah. Yeah, I do have to say I'm looking right now at the top grossing G-rated films, and I mean, there's a lot like Toy Story 4,
Yeah.
Lion King, Toy Story 3, Finding Nemo, Monsters Inc.,
Yeah.
Toy Story 2, Cars, Wall-E, some Aladdin, Ratatouille. Some of these films actually have pretty wide appeal. Like I watched Ratatouille, in my 20s.
Yeah.
It was it's a good movie. Wall-E again, it was just a good movie.
Yeah.
I don't really, again, like, okay, so if it was a movie about the mob, I
Right.
think that that's gonna be hard to do with a G rating, like,
Of course. Of course. And like that's a sort of movie that you're not going to like that's not geared towards kids, so you're not going to take the kids to that anyway. There's a lot of movies that are like that I understand. Okay, fine. But if you have something that is geared towards kids, and especially if you you purport to be like a Christian, I mean, I don't want to harp on the Christian thing, but it is like, you know, you're there's a different brand, right? So
if you identify as a Christian movie, studio or
right.
a Christian band or whatever,
Yeah.
like, you are attaching yourself to a particular brand that
Right.
means very specific things to people.
Correct. And I wouldn't like, if they had been using bad language in Bad Guys 2, right? I still wouldn't like it, right? I would still be upset. I wouldn't be quite as upset. But also, they didn't do it in Bad Guys 2, you know? In Bad
Yeah.
Guys 2, which, it's a kids movie, but yeah, a lot of these movies I would say that have made a lot of money, they're geared towards kids, but they include enough stuff where the adults are not bored, Like the adults can see the movie and be like, "Yeah, yeah, okay, that's fine." The Despicable Me movies were like that, other stuff. Um, so it can be done. You can make a lot of money. Uh, I don't know. I haven't checked to see how Sketch is doing. We were the only people in the theater, although we did I deliberately go to a early showing um, to try and, uh, for that reason. There's
Yeah.
other issues where it would be better to have like fewer people in the theater with us. Um, but yeah, so I don't know, but it just seems a very foolhardy strategy uh to make movies that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we've talked about this before, I think, somewhat, we are in a weird place when it comes to movies and film. Uh, a lot of Zoomers and Gen Alpha, and so this is, Gen Alpha's 2010 and after, so
Mhm.
they're, the oldest ones are now 15. These are prime moviegoers. It
Wow.
tends to be, boys between 15 and 20, for example, back in the day, I remember, like, they were the ones that really drove, like, big box office PG-13 films
Right.
because they would go over and over and over and rewatch it.
Right.
But, like, they're trying to figure out their way in the film industry, partly because, like, attention spans are decreasing. The whole Marvel money machine seems to kind of losing steam.
Yeah.
And, I think, they're pivoting and trying to find, like, what is the cultural temperature? There's other ways to entertain yourself, like video games and these immersive interactive worlds. And are you gonna set aside, 2.5 hours, like a hour 90 minutes for a movie, but really you gotta get there a little early,
Hmm.
you go to the bathroom. I'm just saying usually it's a closer to 2.5 hours that you're gonna be spending at the movie theater. And so I think that there is a phase of experimentation that's going on, and so there's weird, um, things. And, this is unrelated to what you're saying, but, it is capitalist, but also, they're trend followers. So right now, there's a lot of movies. I think it's finally tailing off where they were cast right after BLM, and you see black actors in inexplicable places, you know?
Right.
Like,
Right.
I just did Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is the one that I'll give you an example of because I went with my kids, like, I think it was, like, 6 months ago, but anyway, it's a European city, but, like, 40% of the people are black. But, like, they're not African American, they're European. I don't know. The whole thing was a little weird, and
Yeah.
my kids asked about it, and I was like, I think that probably they did the casting at a time where," and so that wasn't for financial reasons, that was just for, like, the cultural zeitgeist, you know?
Yeah.
And, even with Christian films, and, there's this whole thing with Christian groups, they kind of start out in the Christian subculture, and then they wanna shed that even though
Yes.
they may remain practicing Christians, they
Right.
want their group, their band's identity to be beyond that because they want a wider appeal, so they'll do things
Mhm.
like swear and,
Yeah.
be a little they're never gonna be, like, totally out there like Marilyn Manson or anything, but
Right.
for a Christian like, they definitely need to, like, kinda show that they're not Christian anymore,
Right.
and it's often, like, a little awkward and, the Zoomers would say cringe, because it's like, "Come on, like, you're just trying to make a show, but this is all just, like, brand creation, and, like, you're
Right.
fundamentally the same person," you know? Um so I think what you're alluding to here is, it seems like this is a movie studio that had a very clear brand in the beginning and is trying to figure it out. And there are these like misfires. And you're like, well, what's the logic behind this? Maybe there's not a logic. Maybe they're just like
Right.
doing random things to see what'll work,
Mhm.
because this is an industry that's in transition, and that is, to some extent in crisis. Now, there were doom and gloom sayers during the COVID pandemic that people would never go back to the movie theaters. That didn't turn out to be true. But like the ubiquity of things like streaming and whatnot, clearly there has been a change. And movies need to, what is their value proposition? It's not like a default thing. This is even before us. The 1950s and and earlier, going to the movies, going to the picture shows or whatever, that was just something that you just did on a Saturday.
Right.
Now it's like, okay, there's like a lot of things you could do on a Saturday, a lot, you know?
Yes. Right.
And so like how do you distinguish yourself? Yeah, that's not always easy to tell. And so I guess like, making children's film a bit edgy would be one way. The 1985 Transformers movie had some swearing. And I remember like everyone was really I was a little kid then, but everyone was a little shocked by that. Like, and it was kind of pointless,
Right. Yes.
in terms of, like I still don't understand why they did it. I just think they wanted to
It's the
show that.
same. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's the same reason. but uh,
Because like Optimus Prime, just a spoiler, Optimus Prime dies. You
right.
know, and so that was like a big enough
It
shock.
was
You
the
didn't need to swear.
Yeah, yeah, and aside from the swear, Transformers movie was the first time where after however many seasons of them shooting at each other, they actually finally hit each other, and not just Optimus Prime, but like a bunch of the
Yeah,
opening, sequence in the Transformers animated movie. A ton of characters just die, like in
yeah.
like it's an actual battle, including both Optimus and Megatron, although Megatron comes back sort of. But yeah. So I don't know.
I I'm still wondering. I'm still wondering, like what's going on with kids' movies. If like Pixar had a formula where you would make films that were entertaining to adults.
Yes.
They didn't have bad language. They didn't have like adult themes, and they made a bunch of money.
Yeah. I think they still are. Is Inside Out Pixar?
I think it is. Yeah.
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 Um,
Yeah. So they still.
and Zootopia, is that Pixar or is that?
I believe so. I believe
Yeah.
so.
Although I think there was some language in Zootopia. I don't know. Um, but yeah, so I mean, some people are still following the formula, I think.
So Zootopia was Disney, but
Disney. Okay. All right.
although now I think they bought Pixar, didn't they?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't
Anyway.
keep track. Anyway, I will say I've been fairly down on movies for a while, but this summer it does seem like there has been a recovery somewhat. I saw the Phoenician Scheme, the Wes Anderson movie, which I thought was really good after, the last couple of his films had been kind of, uh, you know, trite and pseudo profound. And I saw Eddington, uh, uh, which is really good, albeit strange. It's about COVID. It's about COVID and about George Floyd and about all that stuff. It's set in like a small New Mexico town in 2020, um, and very hard to describe. Although there's like a lot of very good satirical stuff about how weird that time was. The uh, some of the superhero movies or whatever, the kind of popcorn movies, those have been good too. So I don't think it's a problem of movies in general. Um, I do think that some people are having trouble kind of figuring out the formula, but it's out there if people are able to do it.
Okay, so the last thing is, I want to talk a little bit about AI and where we are. So I recently went to a party at SF with a lot of AI people. Alexander Wang of Scale AI was there. There's a lot of Scale AI people around. Anyway, but this is still kind of a huge segment of our economy. I mean, there are people who are claiming that basically most of American economic growth can be somehow, uh, you know, attributed right now to the AI boom,
Mhm.
um, which there are some Chinese companies that are competitive, but basically it's the U.S. and China. In terms of like, because artificial intelligence requires a lot of compute resources, and now AI is also driving things like data centers, which are consuming water, which is a moral panic among liberals and left wing people. Like the UK is saying delete old emails and pictures to save like computational resources. This is also fake. It doesn't use enough water for it to matter, and also unrelated to AI, the whole issue with water resources is it's just like pricing misallocations or like the lack of pricing. Like if you have pricing on water, there's never any problem with water. But I guess like what I wanted to like talk about and just bring up is how AI is like I guess it's like 3 years into the current AI hype cycle. OpenAI launched ChatGPT in the fall of I think 2022. Yeah, fall of 2022, and now almost 3 years in. We are in a new AI economy, and everything and nothing is attributed to AI. So, for example, there was something out about how computer programmers, software engineers are having a hard time getting jobs. some people say partly it's due to AI.
Yeah.
As speaking as someone that's kind of in the field or is adjacent, and is hiring, the issue here is, mid to senior level engineers are getting to use AI and it's increasing their productivity and they're working a little differently, which means that companies don't really want to bring on junior people where they don't know what they're going to exactly do. So they're just like waiting a year or two. So this is just delayed hiring. It's not really like a succession of hiring. Um, Obviously there's like whole fields that are like translation has been totally transformed by AI.
Hmm.
People like healthcare has been transformed by AI as well. People routinely ask ChatGPT questions.
Right.
Then you have the whole idea of AI boyfriends and AI girlfriends, AI therapists. Um, it's interesting to me because like some people use AI for very like I have friends who use AI as a therapist, and I've never thought about doing a thing like that. I'm like, okay, but I'm not like a big therapy guy in general.
Yeah.
And so it's just interesting how the range of things AI is. Like, I'll use AI to like, collate a table and create a CSV file. That's the kind of thing I use AI for. Um, and then there's this whole like bigger macro picture where it's like, are you a doomer or do you think AI is actually just going to be another tool, et cetera, et cetera. I have over the last 3 years become less and less of a doomer insofar as like I don't think artificial general intelligence is going to emerge that like makes us obsolescent, uh, at least in the near future. Let's just say that like the next 10 to 20 years. Okay, it's hard to say. It looks like ChatGPT 5, the latest release, is an incremental improvement, not like a qualitative improvement.
Hmm.
It could be like we are hitting like the scaling basically there's like scaling laws where you put like more compute resources and you get these like outcomes. And the reality is, within computer science, they didn't expect AI to be so great just by increasing resources. There was like some sort of like non-linear response. But that also means that they don't understand when it's going to like level out. It looks like it may be leveling out at least in the short term. But there's a whole thing in your field. Well, I mean, not your field, but the field that you were trained in the law,
Yeah.
where a lot of lawyers are using AI.
Yeah. I mean, it's a problem because lawyers are using AI to write the briefs, but the AI will hallucinate cases. It will hallucinate